Mask of a Diva, a Stan Kraychik mystery, Book 4, 1994. Author, Grant Michaels. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York. Author, Eric Aust. For all the divas, operatic and otherwise. Chapter 5. Back at the cottage, I unpacked my bags, then did a few token exercises and showered. It was around 6:30 when I set out for the reception at the big house. The sun was nearing the horizon and streaking the evening sky with bold strokes of mauve and magenta. I found an alternate path to the mansion, one that led out to the ocean cliffs. A lookout platform surveyed the world from high above the sea, while far below the surf crashed on huge rugged rocks, some of them big as boxcars. Billows of cool, sultry mist ascended the cliffs and swirled around me, cleansing me of my recent ordeals with the raging queen of wigs. As I approached the big house, I saw small groups of people gathered along the circular driveway, chatting and drinking and smoking, creating an air of refined civility. From the open windows of the house came the lights and the voices and the clinking of glasses and clattering plates of a festive event in progress. And yes, there was music too. I realized that anyone even vaguely associated with the opera festival was probably in there now, and I had this sudden urge to bolt. I wanted to be home again in the quite familiar comfort of my lover and my cat. But my lover was in Paris, and my cat was with my friend Nicole, so the hard facts were that home was here for now, and there wasn't a soul back in Boston pining for me. I continued my way toward the entrance of the mansion, preparing and coaching myself to face the crowd of people inside, wondering who I should be tonight. Though, on the surface, I may appear to be confident and sociable. That's all a mask. Part of my work as a hairstylist. Underneath, inside, I have terrible stage fright. I'm always unsure of myself among strangers. Fortunately, though, I'm a Gemini, and we are blessed with malleable, adaptable, and capricious personalities. Some would say it's our bane as well. As I passed by the loitering smokers, I greeted them politely. I thought I even recognized a few of them from the orchestra that plays for the ballet company, where my lover works. One young man smiled and waved to me. He was rosy-cheeked and sturdily built, wearing a tuxedo and holding a long, tapered cigarette holder. "Hello again," he said, but I had no idea who he was. I waved and smiled politely, then moved on. I stepped up to the front door and pressed firmly on the doorbell, holding it down a second or two longer than necessary. Nerves, I told myself. I tend to forget quantum mechanics and misjudge time when I'm nervous. Witness the rare crimped perm walking out of Snip's salon. Parker answered the door. From behind him came the raucous energy of a large party approaching its peak. He greeted me and said that Miss Davenport had been expecting me. "I'm afraid I was delayed," I said, and then thought, what does he care about my timeliness? Parker replied, "I shall alert Miss Davenport of your arrival." While he went off to fetch Daphne, I surveyed the large reception hall and took in the crowd. It looked as though all the celebrities of the Boston musical world were in attendance, and all their hangers-on as well. Daphne appeared in the foyer wearing a cotton jersey dress, cut full and pleated, pure white, splashed with bold graphics of red, yellow, and blue. She opened her arms to me and exclaimed, "My dear, I missed you. I was afraid you'd forgotten." I lost track of time, was all I could offer. I didn't want to tell her what hell I'd seen at the opera house that afternoon. "We've already lost one guest," she said. "Bruce David is still upstairs sick. But here you are, and my friends are still all looking forward to meeting you." She took my arm and led me into the main reception room. We snaked our way through the well-heeled crowd and passed by many tables laden with colorful and exotic foods. Daphne said, "The punch is especially good tonight." Then she gave a sly wink. "I added the London gin myself." I ladled us each a glassful, then I made a toast. "To new friends," I said. "To new friends," said Daphne. We drank and then moved on. That's when I noticed, standing off in a corner of the room, apart from the crowd and looking alone and abandoned Rick Jansen, or Ricky, as Jonathan Byers had referred to his young bugger assistant. Rick had doffed his sunsuit for black leather jeans and a white silk shirt, and later worn open to show off his tan and his torso. I noticed Jonathan Byers in another part of the hall, holding court in his contemptuous way with a small retinue around him. For his part, Byers was all in black, a black cotton jacket over a black t-shirt with black slacks and shoes. It really set off his brassy hair. Standing close beside him was a tall, handsome man with a mate brown skin, the hue of a dopo cappuccino. At one point, Byers leaned toward the dark man and whispered to him. Then he pointed toward Ricky Thing in the far corner. The other man glanced that way too, then smiled and nodded approvingly. Perhaps they were negotiating a timeshare deal for the generically desirable Rick. Daphne's voice entered my perverse meanderings. The handsome man with Jonathan Byers is Adam Pierce. What does he do? I said, intrigued by a name that conjured a 12-step guru for the impotent man. Daphne replied, Adam is the set designer for Ballo. Then a glamorous middle-aged couple approached us, and Daphne introduced them as old friends. The woman said to Daphne, Did you hear about young Sonia Hatfield? Daphne said no, but her face showed grave concern. The woman went on, It was certainly tragic for her, but it's unfortunate for you as well. Her husband tried to intervene, but the woman persisted. I thought surely you'd heard by now. What happened? Said Daphne with an impatience I hadn't expected from her. Her friend explained with barely suppressed triumph. After all these years and bungled tries, Sonia finally did it. She killed herself. This morning. Just put her head down on the track so the train from Boston came around the bend. There was no time to stop her, or the train. Oh dear, said Daphne. The poor girl, so tortured. I was on that train, I offered. The woman ignored me. Sonia had a suicide note on her, Daphne said. And? The woman reported smugly. It said that Jonathan Byers was a bisexual rapist. Daphne frowned. Handwritten? Both the man and the woman nodded. Daphne said, Sonia's writing? Again a nod. The woman said, So you see, you're indirectly involved. Who knows about this? Said Daphne. Apparently everyone in town but you, said her so-called friend, as if to counter his wife's impertinence. The husband said, Sonia was a very sick young woman. I know that, snapped Daphne. I'd been consulted on her case. She pressed her lips tightly together for a moment, then said, Sonia had wanted so badly to be a singer. I'd never met anyone with such burning desire. I always sensed that if her dream wasn't realized, it would destroy her. The poor creature finally lost the will to keep dreaming. Now her pain and struggle are over. I scanned the reception hall and once again saw Jonathan Byers flirting brazenly with Adam Pierce. One final time it struck me that, denied access to such absurdity as this, a young woman had killed herself. Then, through the storm of party noise, through all the attendant rush of laughter and conversation and music in the air, I heard a distinctive, high-pitched caratura giggle that drove itself directly into the temporal lobe of my brain. Mercifully, it passed quickly, but then it was there again, slicing its way through the crowd and into my skull. Daphne must have sensed the slight jolt in my body, because she remarked, Madame Ostinata has arrived. She excused herself and went to greet the woman, who had just entered the reception hall with a maestro, Toscanelli. A marked change had taken place in the two people. They were no longer the tired travelers who had arrived earlier with their baggage and a maid. Now they were performers who represented a world beyond ordinary human existence. They were the stars of a formal summer reception among opera aficionados. The maestro was dazzling enough with his mane of white hair and equally impressive white mustache against a healthy, glowing complexion. But Madama Ostinata even surpassed him. She seemed to emanate light, from her hair to her makeup, to the white sequin dress that emphasized her voluptuous figure, to the gauzy white boa of sheerest silk she had draped over and around her shoulders. Her throat and ears and wrists glittered heavily, and with diamonds and platinum. Everything about the woman was light and reflective. There was no opportunity for shadow, no visible line or wrinkle on her face and neck. Now she had a glass of champagne in her free hand, and she took great pleasure in letting it slosh and spill as she emitted the metallic, penetrating laugh at anything or even nothing that was said to her. At another part of the reception hall, the salon orchestra had launched itself into a passionate tango. The throbbing music caused a sudden shift on the dance floor, and those who had been enjoying the more sedate dance now went off to socialize or to find food and drink. The dance floor became the domain of those who were eager and willing to partake of the sensual tango. I was drawn toward the music and the dance floor, where 5 couples were sliding and strutting their way through a musical maze of domination and submission. I was surprised to see Daphne in the arms of Maestro Toscanelli. The sight of 2 older people daring to be so physical in public triggered mild amusement and mild outrage. I'm jealous, I thought, then smiled. Also on the dance floor was Madame Ostinata, in the arms of that paragon of virility, Adam Pearce. Madama followed her partner's elegant lead. He'd obviously learned his moves in the school of tasteful seduction. Then she whispered into his ear, and he responded by lowering her into a dip. She threw her head back and exposed her throat, stretched her neck out long and vulnerable, unconcerned for the moment about the fragile vocal mechanism within. The diva then arched her back sharply so that her breasts swelled and pressed against the bodice of her sequined gown. From that precarious position she giggled with hedonistic pleasure as the observing crowd applauded her. With the tango, it was never clear who was really in control. I found myself looking beyond the dancing couples to the people who stood and watched from the opposite side of the dance floor. Among them was Jonathan Byers, whose attention was fixed on the dancers and on one couple in particular, Madama Ostinata and Adam Pearce. Sir Jonathan looked troubled by what he saw. Was he jealous? Then his eyes flashed toward me, and our gazes met. My heart raced unexpectedly, and I felt oddly fearful. With great effort, I managed to keep my expression stony. Byers did the same, but then he narrowed his eyes as if to focus the heat of his rage through them and sear a pathway into my mind. Before my forehead got sweaty, and I was disoriented. For a moment, I felt my brain swell under the assault of his stare. Then Byers turned away suddenly and vanished into the crowd, and my own vision returned. The tango ended just as abruptly with that characteristic unresolved cadence, a musical implication that love prevails despite the pain and damage it might inflict. General applause followed the end of the music, and 4 of the dancing couples took modest bows. Madame Ostinata indulged in a deep, extravagant stage bow. The maestro excused himself from Daphne, and she watched him longingly as he departed into the crowd. I went to her side. "What a delightful man," she said. "And a good dancer," I added. "And," said Daphne, almost glowing, "still a bachelor." "Where do you go?" Daphne pleaded. "He's a man who likes his cigarettes." Madame Ostinata was still taking curtain calls when the crowd insisted that she sing for them. "Oh, I cannot," she demurred. "You will hear me soon." Her English seemed to have improved remarkably since that afternoon. Perhaps the tango had helped. It often cured as many troubles as it created. More applause, more bows followed, yet the woman had done little more than refuse everyone's request to sing. The small orchestra took its break, and most of the crowd began to disperse toward the food and drink as well. It was then that a young woman approached Daphne and myself. She was about my height and almost the same build, which for a woman meant she resembled a Valkyrie. Daphne introduced her to me as April Kilkus. Madama's study. I recognized the name of a fellow Slav. This one, a Lithuanian. April had the robust figure of someone raised on buckwheat groats and cultured cream. Her complexion was smooth and glowing. So was her ambition, I found as she spoke unassumingly to Daphne. I know it's unusual for singers to perform at parties like this, but since the crowd was asking for something, I wouldn't mind doing an aria if you'd like me to. Daphne was taken aback, but she replied with aplomb. I'm certain they'd all love to hear you, and I would too. Let me announce it. Thank you, said April. I'll go get my accompanist. And off she ran. Daphne and I exchanged glances. I said, she must really want to sing if she's willing to do it at a party. Daphne said, she's an understudy, my dear. She has nothing to lose. Within moments, April Kilkus returned with her accompanist, a plain woman named Carolyn Boetz, whose melancholy eyes appeared shrunken behind the thick lenses of her eyeglasses. April consulted with Daphne for a moment. Then Daphne stepped up onto the dais and got the attention of her guest. She announced that April Kilkus would sing the aria Moro, ma prima in grazia, from the festival's opening production of Verdi's Un ballo in Mascara. It was one of the few operatic arias I was familiar with, thanks to my super-cultured lover. The clattered sound of applause brought other people back into the salon near the dais. April Kilkus faced her audience almost defiantly. She stood alone without support from the piano. From the keyboard, Carolyn Boetz played the opening bars. Her mouth fell slightly open, and a sadness appeared on her face as she played. In the score, those first doleful lines of music are played by a solo cello. But somehow, through her love and affinity for Verdi and the piano, Carolyn Boetz persuaded the huge instrument to resonate and sing with the same mournful quality of a cello, tenderly caressed. She may have appeared plain on the outside, but Carolyn's inner life certainly had depth and richness. And then April Kilkus sang her first notes. From the initial sound, it was clear that she was a talent to be reckoned with. The crowd was enthralled with every phrase, every breath, every nuance the dramatic soprano made. I noticed standing in the doorway to the salon the same chunky, tuxedoed man who'd been smoking outside earlier. His attention was now fixed on the singer with wide, adoring eyes. Standing next to him was a tall Asian man with the same smitten look on his face. How strange love is. Already two sides of a triangle were forming. Among the audience, I also saw Jonathan Byers, who was openly entranced by April's voice. It was strange to see him so tranquil. His catamite bugger thing was nowhere near him, but Adam Pearce was, and he was listening to April's voice with cool detachment, as though the music she was creating was something he realized he was supposed to appreciate. Daphne was beside the maestro again, and their responses to the aria paralleled each other. Only Madame Ostinata, on the maestro's other arm, was shooting daggers toward the dais, looks that seemed to say, "How dare she sing?" Madama toyed with her necklace, rattling the heavy jewels and precious metal, and creating a mild nuisance. The maestro patted her arm gently, as if to calm her. The aria closed with a shimmering sottovoce cadenza, while April sang it. Time stopped, and world peace was achieved. In the quiet moments after the last note, nothing was heard throughout the entire salon save the careless rattle of Madame Ostinata's necklace and a noticeably clicking of her tongue. Maestro Toscanelli then applauded heartily toward both performers and encouraged the audience's enthusiasm as well. Everyone clamored for another selection, but April refused them. She'd made a point. "Pity she's only the understudy," said a voice behind me. I turned to see who it was, the tall Asian man who moved beside me and was now cheering April with calls of "Brava!" The party had reached its climax. There was nothing to do but leave at the crest of excitement, or else stay too long and pick up the debris. I made my way toward Daphne. She was still applauding with Maestro Toscanelli, while Madama Ostinata was still fuming. "I'm going," I said. "So soon?" asked Daphne. I nodded and made excuses about tiredness. "See you in the morning, then," she said. "Breakfast here at the big house. 8 o'clock sharp?" Minutes later, I was almost out the front door when I heard from the music salon a terrific tremolo of chords from the big piano. Some ham-fisted player had replaced Carlin Boetz. Then followed a wave of applause and loud cheers from the crowd. I looked back inside and saw Madama Ostinata standing on the dais and preparing to sing. She had cleverly seized upon April Kilkis's enraptured audience for her own purposes, but her accompanist was the real surprise. It was none other than Rick Jansen, Jonathan Byers' personal assistant driver. Thing, or perhaps ex-thing, was more correct, considering Byers' recent behavior with Adam Pearce. Who would have thought Rick Jansen could play the piano as well as drive? But once he began, I realized he was all fist and no wrist. He pounded out a bombastic introduction to Madama's chosen selection, a circus version of Johann Strauss's Voices of Spring. Between the two of them, it was sure to be a travesty of real music, with trills and frills and interpolations. But what truly puzzled me was how they even knew each other. And then I saw Daniel Carafalio cheering from the front lines. "Brava, Marcella! Bravissima!" So I quickly learned which side of the musical bread he liked to butter. At the door, I caught Parker's attention and spoke like a conspirator. "You'd better cushion the crystal for this one." "Very good, Mr. Kraychik," he said. "Ho, ho." Outside the door, I saw the young man in the tuxedo, and once again he waved to me. It was only then, and to my embarrassment, that I realized he was really a woman, and vaguely familiar at that. She said, "I saw you at the Opera House this afternoon." I apologized that I didn't recall seeing her. "Sure you did. I'm the stage manager." Then everything clarified in an instant, and in my mind I saw her again at rehearsal in her stage manager's duds, plaid flannel shirt, and jeans. "I remember now," I said. "My name's Rhonda Luca," she said, "but people call me Ron. I'm Stan Kraychik." "I know," she said. "You're a hairdresser." "How'd you know?" I asked. "It's a small world," she said. "I know your partner from the ballet and all." "Oh," I said, nodding. "It's going to be some festival with that Italian cow singing," said Rhonda. "She's a sonic health hazard." "But her understudy is good," I said. "She's the best," replied Rhonda. "Well, see you around," I said. "Damn right," said Rhonda. I moved away from the light and onto the estate lawns. Then I continued into the darkness onto the broad expanse of soft grass. As I moved over the lawn, I felt the urgent need to be away from the house and those people, to be back safely inside the cottage. In my haste, I moved a bit too fast and found myself stumbling, breathing quickly, gasping, almost running away from something I couldn't identify, but something heavy and oppressive. Far across the dark lawn, I saw the dimly lit path that led to my cottage. I made a dash for it, running faster than I should have in unfamiliar ground. But I couldn't slow myself down somehow. Had to go faster, had to get back to safety before something caught up with me. Then I lost my footing and crumpled onto the cool, moist grass. I rolled onto my back and, looking up at the sky, it was blazing with stars. I lay there a few moments and caught my breath. Why had I panicked? What had come over me? It was as though I had wanted to be afraid and wanted to run away from something, and so I had purposely created a feeling of fright within myself and then had run, witless, to escape from nothing. I watched the stars until I lost track of time. Eventually I felt a chill and I got to my feet. I pulled myself up straight and tall, then strode toward the dimly lit path that would lead me home. I passed through the dark, convoluted tunnel of foliage and trees, and finally I saw the soft glow of light ahead, the light from the cottage. I would be snug and safe. I could lick my imaginary wounds in solitude. I unlocked the door and entered. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.